Okay, here we are in Unit 8, the final unit of this class. And in this unit, we're going to discuss how to get better. And that sounds a bit woolly and vague, but actually it's the key to the whole thing. Everyone starts off not knowing what they're doing. And that feeling of not knowing what you're doing is one that is going to keep going throughout your career, because you're going to work on new teams, you're going to work on new technologies, you're going to solve new problems that haven't been solved before. So you're always going to be in a situation where you initially don't know what you're doing, and then you have to work out how to do that thing. So, proceeding in conditions of uncertainty, how do we build teams that are effective at learning, and how do we build organizations that are effective at learning? So, in this module, we'll talk about the principles of organizational change. We'll talk about some methods you can use to find waste, unproductive work in your team and in your organization, techniques such as activity accounting, and we'll talk about how to apply those to find waste and then find ways to remove waste in your process. We'll talk about how to adopt a scientific approach to pursuing process improvement and getting better. And we'll talk about the limitations of the way that a lot of teams and organizations get better, which is adopting methodologies. That way of working has limitations, and it's important to understand those. And crucially, we'll talk about how you actually get stuff done in big organizations, because many of you will be moving into big organizations, and many of you working in small organizations. If you are successful, those organizations will grow and you'll need to understand how to do this stuff. Organizational change. Here's the key. Organizations are always changing. The question is that happening in a directed way where you're actually driving the process based on your goals, or is it happening in an undirected way because you're not creating and applying strategy? And most organizations, unfortunately, are in the second camp. Their organization is changing, their environment is changing, but it's not happening in a directed, purposeful way. When you don't know how to correctly deploy strategy, what happens is ultimately you get yourself in a fix where things are going poorly and slowly and badly, and you need to really fix that. It becomes a crisis. And so in that situation, often organizations create change programs. And as we know, programs are defined in part by having an end date. So a program of work, like a project, has an end date. It's something where we allocate resources in the pursuit of a particular goal, and when we achieve that goal, we get rid of the program. And that is hugely problematic. What you see is organizations which aren't constantly working on getting better. If you don't apply effort towards that, what happens is you slowly get worse. Things gradually degrade. Things don't stay the same if you don't try and address problems. They gradually, slowly get worse. It's the second law of thermodynamics, if you like, applied to organizational dynamics. And then what happens is when things get so bad that you really have to fix it, we implement a change program. And actually what happens when you implement a change program is things get worse initially, and then hopefully they improve. And then we end the change program because we've achieved the objective or we've run out of resources. And then business as usual gradually causes things to degrade. And so a lot of organizations are kind of in this constant spiral of things getting worse, and then you kind of push them back up a bit and then they get worse. That's not how to effectively create organizational change. So here are some principles. Firstly, the best organizations are always trying to get better. They're not comparing themselves to other organizations to see, oh, well, how are we doing? Let's at least do better than these other people. Organizations are constantly trying to get better, and their comparison point is themselves. They don't care what other people are doing. They care about, what am I doing? How can I get better? How can I improve? Secondly, the leaders and the teams agree the outcomes they're trying to achieve. But the leaders don't tell the teams how to achieve those outcomes. It's up to the teams to work out how to best achieve those outcomes. As with product development, organizational change is not something that you want to deliver in a big bang way. It's something that you want to be doing as part of everyone's daily work. And the way we achieve big outcomes is by iteratively and incrementally working every day to shift some of the way there. This is true of product development, it's true of organizational change, it's true of architectural change. Any big change is achieved through a series of smaller changes. In order to build an organization where improvement is part of everyone's daily work, you need to build a culture of experimentation. And we've talked about this in previous units. We're going to talk about it in a bit more structured way in this unit. And again, the way you implement improvement work is not in a top-down way by the leaders telling people what to do. It's not in a bottoms-up way on its own, because certainly individual teams can improve, but that doesn't lead to systemic improvement. It leads to little pockets of improvement that burst up and then die out, and then the overall organizational impact is negligible. So you've got to create systems through which change becomes pervasive and everyone is working in the same direction. And in order to do that, you need to build community structures as well as having a mechanism for deploying strategy throughout the organization. Crucially, people need to believe that change is important. There's a good book by John Cotter called Leading Change, where he says that a majority of employees, perhaps 75% of management overall, and virtually all the top executives need to believe that considerable change is absolutely essential. If you don't have organizational support to work to improve and change, it's very hard to do anything in a systemic way. It all becomes localized by team. And the key is, this has to be true all the time. We always have to have a focus on getting better, on changing, because we are always changing all the time. Our environment's changing, technologies are changing, our company's changing. So we need to focus on using strategy to direct that change. And that's something that everyone in the organization has to devote resources and attention to all the time.